Workplace relationships once again in the spotlight after former Toronto Mayor John Tory resigned because of what he called, quote, a serious error in judgment. But what are the rules and the law on the matter? Employment lawyer Alex Lucifero joins us now to talk more about that. Alex, I guess, first of all, maybe the question for many people, can employers straight out prohibit or ban workplace relationships?
Well, it would be within their power to do so. So there's nothing inherently wrong with outright banning workplace relationships, Matt. I wouldn't recommend it as an employment lawyer. I think a ban on romantic relationships in the workplace is actually the wrong way to go about it, simply because by outright banning them, you're essentially going to be driving them underground, so to speak, and there won't be any kind of disclosure of these relationships, and you're risking that as an employer. It would be much more prudent rather to have a policy that to some degree or extent allows for workplace relationships with some degree of restrictions there.
And have you seen a policy like that in place, or do many workplaces have it? How prominent is something like that?
It is quite common. It's becoming more and more common. We've seen lots of stories in the news over the past few years about issues that arise in the workplace as a result of romantic relationships. And so it's going to be the case that, yes, you absolutely do as an employer want a romantic relationship policy in your workplace. And again, you don't necessarily want to be banning relationships outright. You want to avoid, however, two particular situations, Matt, one of which being a conflict of interest where potentially a romantic relationship puts the company's legitimate business interest in jeopardy. So you can imagine the situation between, let's say, a superior, a management level employee, and a subordinate where that relationship potentially puts the business interests at risk. You also, of course, want to avoid, Matt, a situation where there could be sexual harassment or any degree of harassment in the workplace between two partners in a relationship. That very well could be a possibility as well. You want a policy to very clearly spell out situations effectively where those kinds of conflicts or harassment situations don't arise, and make sure that you're guarding against those kinds of situations.
Right. And I guess from an employee perspective too, can someone ultimately be fired for dating a coworker? Is that allowed?
Well, in the context of a non-unionized workplace, let's say just any kind of office, actually, Matt, you can let an employee go really for any particular reason. It's what we call a without cause termination. So you don't necessarily need to tie it to the relationship itself. And so in that case, that employee would certainly be owed severance. I'd say in most of these kinds of situations, an employee would be owed severance. However, if we're dealing with such a kind of conflict of interest situation, or certainly where there is harassment in the workplace that's related to a romantic relationship, that's when an employer may very well have cause to terminate an employee, in which case, of course, they could be terminated. They can also potentially be terminated without severance. Those situations are rare, Matt, but they do happen.
Right. Again, as we talk about it being front and center once again, employment lawyer Alex Lucifero, always appreciate your time, Alex. Thank you for this, sir.
My pleasure.